I can't make a case for Wayne Rooney to get a Premier League manager's job. I can't make a case for him to get a Championship manager's job. Welcome to this week's edition of One to One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget, of course, to keep liking and subscribing, and equally as importantly, to leave your questions in the comment section below. But let's get on with this week's show. The question of Eriksson going to Man United is an interesting one because Man United are in a state of flux, and whilst Eriksson has been incredibly successful with Brentford, that's one thing at the end of the table where you're fighting for survival. He made a very big difference in a side that was in decline, and of course, whilst Man United are in decline, going to Manchester United with that evolution or revolution or whatever Ten Hag is going to produce may not mean he's going to be a particularly front and centre player. So I'm not entirely sure why he would turn down Man United, but I'm not entirely sure that Manchester United was the right move. You know, there was an opportunity given to him by Brentford, he took it. He should think very carefully at this stage in his career about what is right, both from the point of view of integrity and also what's right for him physically, mentally, and the amount of games that he wants to play. So I don't think it should be looked at as Manchester United of old. How could you turn down Man United? There are many, many reasons why you should turn down Man United, because ultimately that team, probably from the engine room, needs a rebuild. Now, I'm not suggesting we go back to the challenges that Eriksson had a summer ago, but you need people with legs around him to give him an ability to play, and I'm not sure United are in that position yet. So I'm not surprised, but these deals have many twists and turns. Don't be surprised if it comes back again. Well, that is, the tearing down of players, the tearing down of people in society is one of the gifts that this country has a great acumen for. We build them up so we can whittle them down. And we say it's the media, but the media provide the supply for what people perceive as the demand. So people obviously want to see people in compromising positions. Look, last week we saw Jack Grealish in Las Vegas, and my reaction to it was, despite the fact I've called him a moron before, because if you keep repeating the same set of behaviours and you don't learn from them, then you deserve to be called a moron. But actually going to Las Vegas, to having some time as a young mid-20s man, playing for the best, arguably the best team in Europe, Manchester City, albeit that I think Liverpool are a slightly better side. And I know that's going to rankle with Man City fans because obviously Liverpool didn't win the competitions that would tell that argument. But to go back to the points, Grealish is entitled to behave within reason the way he wants to. He's playing for an elite manager that knows what he expects from his players. Foden's the same. I don't think we have too many discipline problems within the confines of Man City, besides, young boys acting out at times. And I'm not in the ridiculous Trevor Sinclair camp of boys will be boys. But the media will do what they do. And as long as you're not compromising yourself, you're not compromising your relationships and damaging your personal life, why shouldn't these young guys, within reason, go away for 2 or 3 weeks, don't break the law, but have a bit of fun for God's sakes, and then get back into the groove, because they all know, Foden and Grealish, they've got a World Cup coming up, and I think we should judge them by that, not by some silly, lurid, sensationalised, red-top drivel that sometimes finds itself in the newspapers. Look, it would be laughable to think that 2 signings of players, that one that's played in a side that now will avoid relegation, and one that's played for an elite side but doesn't score the goals that you would have expected in playing for a side that creates that many chances. What it does do is it gives Arsenal fans some feelings of encouragement. If Rafinha does land at Arsenal, you're talking about 2 Brazilian players coming into this team. We had Tim Vickery on another show talking about the ability of these players and the way that Rafinha has punched his way into the Brazilian setup now because he's, ultimately such a good player. And Jesus is such a good player too, but there's a mixed bag about whether he wants to play as a centre forward or come in off the right or wherever he wants to come in off. Look, I think they're both statements of intent. I think if Arteta is a decent coach, he'll get them into the right frame of mind. They've both come from backgrounds where they've worked with very interesting coaches. Bielsa for Rafinha for a period of time, and obviously Pep Guardiola, and Arteta knows Guardiola and will know Jesus. So I don't think it in any shape or form in this universe or the next tells you that Arsenal are going to be winning the Premier League anytime soon, but what it might do is make the run-in and the chase for the top four far more compelling for Arsenal than possibly it would have been without these signings, because Tottenham and all those other sides that occupy a little peripheral place around the top four behind the Chelseas, Man Cities and Liverpools are going to be very mindful of Arsenal's ambitions at the same time as they are going to become even more competitive themselves under Conte and Ten Hag and whoever else we want to throw in the mix. So good signings in my book. Should West Ham take a punt on Anthony Martial? I would say absolutely not. On what basis? What's he done for Manchester United? What did he do when he went out on loan? What does his attitude appear to be like? I would think he is one to keep at arm's length, or more to the point, to steer well clear of. Look, I mean, David Moyes is no fool. The coaching staff he has behind him is no fool. If they think and they can see something in this boy they can turn, that's great. You know, at one point, David Moyes turned Marko Arnautovic into something more compelling than a problem player. So you can make that argument. But for me, no, Martial is one of those I'd send anywhere in a cab. I can't make a case for Wayne Rooney to get a Premier League manager's job. I can't make a case for him to get a Championship manager's job. Look, it's one thing holding together a disparate group of players that are galvanised by adversity, that you've got no choice with. You've got a limited amount of players playing in what at times was a very low-end Championship, you know, with teams getting very low levels of points. Derby, of course, with a 21-point loss and deficit, pulled it back and made it competitive. Yet again, when Derby had an opportunity to kick on, they didn't kick on with points when they were almost within touching distance, and they did it the previous season under Rooney. They got a head start, then I think they won one of the last 13 games. Now people will say that's because of injuries and Simon, you're not across the detail and so on and so forth. But Rooney, you know, has made a better fist of being a manager than I anticipated he would. He didn't start the season in an auspicious way by finding himself being photographed in hotel rooms in a certain set of circumstances. But we all make mistakes, but not when you're trying to be a manager. You don't. So I don't know. I don't think he's hurt himself. I think people will see him as a slightly maturer individual when he's not in court, you know, defending ridiculous Wagatha Christie allegations against his wife. But I do think that Rooney will struggle. Now, of course, his name is stellar in certain respects, but I'm looking at it from a pragmatic point of view with no dog in the fight. I think he did pretty well in a difficult situation that was actually sometimes made a little bit easier because the expectations levels were so much lower. If you think you're making a case for him to be a Premier League manager, then I've got to be honest, you're away with the fairies. I think our refereeing standard is grotesquely and unfairly maligned. I don't think we are as bad as certain segments of the media, certain pundits, certain managers and certain players would like to advance. Tragically for football, it would appear the only people that are never allowed to make a mistake, owners can make mistakes, managers can make mistakes, players can make mistakes, but a referee makes a mistake and the whole cathedral comes down on his head in terms of ridicule, parody and abuse. I think we've got to get the tech right and the interaction between the technology, the video-assisted referee in the way that it's called for by on-pitch decisions. But I don't look at our referees and say they're shocking. There are bad decisions, I grant you. There are bad circumstances. We do need to breed at times a better character of referee that's more of a leader, a better communicator. But I don't look at it and say, oh, the blueprint is once upon a time Pierluigi Collini, so everything that comes out of that particular part of the world is a great referee. And you know, look at our referees in the Euros and in the World Cups, they come away with great credits. I do think that we need to look at the PGMOL. I do think that recruiting best in class from overseas into that environment rather than recruiting best in class from foreign referees to come on the pitch is probably a better solution. I do think higher standards of communication with the media should be part and parcel of the refereeing responsibility, but I'm not going to sit in this camp and say that referees are just purely and simply crap because decisions are made that sometimes aren't as good. There are as many decisions being made by managers and owners and players that are bad as there are referees. There is this margin of error called human error. VAR is supposed to help it. It hasn't quite got the dovetail between on-pitch stuff referees needing support when referees should call for it rather than VAR intervening. But I think we aren't that bad or in that unhealthy state as people would like us to believe because they've got individual gripes of individual decisions. I just would like to see a bigger pool of referees, a more aspirational environment of referees wanting to come into the game. I'm not talking about the financial remuneration because these referees have played quite well, but I do think the career needs to be more aspirational from the top of the pyramid to the grassroots so we can get higher quality referees across the 92 teams and the 46 games a season rather than only zeroing in on what happens in the Premier League. And I also think, going off piste, that VAR should be available in every stadium in professional football, funded by the authorities, specifically and explicitly the FA, because a decision between Stevenage and Darlington that goes wrong and VAR could have helped is equally as important as a decision between Liverpool and Man City. So I'm not going to double down on the referees because I do think that refereeing, when I was writing articles in The Observer 15, 16 years ago, some of the refereeing standards were absolutely appalling, and I don't think they're at that point now. That's it for this week's edition of One to One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to leave me your views on Christian Eriksson, Phil Foden and Arsenal winning the Premier League. Of course, like and subscribe and keep leaving your questions in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you next week.